One of the biggest, most global artists of our time is Bad Bunny. You might not think of him at the top of your mind immediately when you're thinking of huge pop stars that are global, that are massive. Ariana, Taylor, Beyonce, the list goes on and on and on. Maybe not the first name that pops up in your mind, but Bad Bunny, do not write him off. This guy is humongous, has a huge global reach, massive in the Latin American world as well, and even is now starting to become a massive reckoning force in, you know, English speaking countries. He might not be huge over in the UK, perhaps comparatively to other names, but in America he certainly is pulling in big numbers. I mean, I think the first week sales for this album were like over 100,000, which is pretty huge in America. So yeah, Bad Bunny, not a name that you're going to immediately think of, but the guy truly is humongous and is an artist that I've been curious about a little bit for a while. I've enjoyed some of his stuff. I've checked out pretty much most of his albums at this point now. I've been always kind of intrigued to see what he does next. I've always found that there's something there, but with each album, it's never quite fully coming together for me personally. I feel like there's always some issue with his albums, generally within the length. You know, they can run on for like 90 minutes, which is just way too long for what he's trying to do. 90-minute albums aren't necessarily a bad thing, but for what Bad Bunny is trying to go for, they just never need to be that long. He doesn't really have the quality control. It feels like stream dumping a lot of the time, which is a common thing for a lot of modern artists, not just attacking Bad Bunny here, but just kind of piling on all the tracks, 25 songs, huge album lengths, but they know that it will do massive in the sales. It will just keep the artist, you know, rolling, ticking by, getting in all the streams. It's a common thing, and I feel like Bad Bunny is a bit of a victim of following that trend here as well. And the thing is as well, like, once you hear 4 or 5 songs, you kind of know the rest. So it's like you're sitting through an album that has very similar sounds for the whole way through. There's a million friggin' features that you can't keep up with. Look, Bad Bunny, there's talent there, but so far he hasn't quite captured an album for me personally yet. So I am pleased to say that Debí Tirar Más Fotos is an album that pretty much tidies up every issue and complaint I just listed there on this one album here. It's an hour long, which is still a bit long, but it's not, you know, going way overboard with being too long. There's 17 tracks comparatively to like the 20 odd that all his other albums have. There's like 5 features. I just feel as though this time around he's kind of tidied things up. The quality control is there. He's not piled on every track in you know, you can imagine, and it just feels more tight and focused. And one of the strengths of the album is actually just the admiration, the bringing the Puerto Rican sounds, the traditional sounds of Puerto Rico into his album here, and him just showing that appreciation, showing that love for it, and bringing it to a global audience, because I think he does a really good job of combining these sounds in with his usual style over on this album. Nuevayol pretty much sets you up for what the album's going to be. You've got that classic traditional Puerto Rican sound at the first like 30 seconds or so, and then it transitions into this like really banging beat, and Bad Bunny just kind of brings that like dance flair to the table that we're known, you know, we've seen and know and love him for. And it's like a nice little sort of peep into what's about to come on the album. It's kind of like, you know, those old Mario games that like teaches you what you're going to do for the first bit, and then like for the rest of the level, you know, it kind of follows that pattern. Like it's that kind of, you know, eye into what's about to come with this track, because you got that classic sound, the traditional sound, but then the banging beats, and it immediately just brings you into what this album is going to do for the entirety of it, and it pretty much does that. And that like beat switch near the end of the track is ridiculous. It's such a riot, so fun, so bouncy, so danceable. It's so good. You've got Baile and Baile. I will say as well, apologies for any botching that I do in this review, because there's going to be a lot of botching. I'm not a linguist, so I will try my best. But this track 3, super highlight on the album. Really fun, again, authentic sounds coming through, the danceable grooves as well, really enjoyable. Bad Bunny's just really at home here, and again, just bringing those sounds of classic Puerto Rico into the mix it's just bringing the album into a new world that we haven't really heard from Bad Bunny, and I just feel like taking us back to those, you know, classic 60s, 70s days is working so well for him, and then melding it together into this modern sound too. I'm just very much a fan of him doing this here. I think it's working so well. And yeah, like I say, this track's so fun. Those chanting vocals remind me of like something like George Ben would do, who isn't quite, you know, the same style of music that Bad Bunny is doing, but there's just something kind of bringing me back to some of those brilliant albums from George Ben. The features as well, Raneo plays off really nicely with Bad Bunny. I actually probably should incorporate more female vocals into his tracks, to be honest with you, because I think it works nicely to have those two ends of the spectrum coming through over these instrumentals. And also the track with Los Pleneros de la Cresta. I've wrote some of these things down because, like I said, I'm not going to be able to memorize these pronunciations well. But yeah, this track as well, love this feature. Kind of interested to hear more of their stuff, because it's like pulling this traditional like drum clapping sound from Puerto Rico into the mix here. Again, just makes for a really cool organic sound that makes the track really pop off nicely for me. Just brings the track list so much more variety than he's ever had in his track list before. El Clúb is another riot for me, just an absolute dance banger. Love that beat, another massive highlight on the album. It's just so hard not to hear this and be, you know, filled with smiles and just wanting to get up and dance immediately. So fun. The final track is this salsa anthem. Oh my god, this track is so much fun, bringing it back to like the Elza Suarez days of just bringing the really traditional salsa sounds in, but it's just so lively, energetic. It really is such a great way to close out this album. You can see his heart is being poured into his home and just wanting to bring those traditional homely vibes into his music. Again, I'm so appreciative of him doing this, because again, it just brings this sound into a global audience, and barely any music sounds like this now. Like, what modern artist really can you point to that's pretty popular? There'll be some smaller artists that are doing it, obviously, but that are this popular doing this. It's so fun to hear this in a mainstream release in 2025. Crazy stuff. But yeah, love that track. Love any of the salsa incorporations anywhere on this album. They're so fun. I guess my main critique would be throughout this album is that he doesn't commit to this the whole way through. Like, you do just get the kind of usual Bad Bunny crooning. I don't know how else to word it, but there's just this like Bad Bunny gargle croon that pops up on some of these tracks that you hear on pretty much every Bad Bunny album, and it just becomes a little monotonous. He hasn't really got a great vocal range, so when you're hearing it, it just kind of gets a bit dull. And he's not a bad singer by any means, but he kind of starts to border on sounding really like painful to listen to for me personally. Boquete being a good example of that. It's like I don't know what effect is being put on his voice, but it sounds like he's gargling. It might just be auto-tune, to be honest with you. It could be that. But yeah, I'm not really a fan of this. It's pretty much apparent on a lot of Bad Bunny tracks that have always never really made me feel like I'm connecting to him properly. And it comes up a few times on this album. A lot of the time it's not there, and this is why I think it's easily his best album. But yeah, just every so often, not really quite here for it, to be honest with you. Also the track, the Lo Que Le Peso a Hawaii, which is slowed right down, one of the slowest moving tracks on the album. Just again, in the mix of all these fun, upbeat, lively, vibrant tracks. Not really sure if this bland track really does a huge amount for me. That classic reggaeton sound is apparent across this album too, though, of course. You got EOO, which is a track that is very much like focused on that kind of classic reggaeton beat, just pummeling the entire track. I think it sounds really good, actually. Not a massive highlight for me on this album. Again, like I say, those traditional sounds just kind of get me so excited that I'm just waiting to hear it the whole time. So, you know, he can't do it for the whole way through, of course, so he's got to kind of appeal to those fans that want to hear this music. But even still, I don't know, I think he could have committed to it even further, actually. I think he's always going to sell really well, and I think this album's going to have some really big bangers, you know, that get popular from it too. You know, particularly some of those really upbeat, lively tracks, like the first track, the Baile, Inolvidable, again, pronouncing that completely wrong probably. But yeah, these are the tracks that I predict would become really big, and I think it's pretty much gonna be the case for him. So yeah, I think he probably could have just committed to the traditional sounds this whole way through and kept those banger beats in there and those fun danceable grooves in there, and I think he would do well for it regardless if he committed to his usual style and threw in some of those reggaeton sounds as well, because I think this is just going to do well for him regardless. Even still though, he's allowed to do it whatever he wants, obviously, but for me personally, as I've already said, yeah, this is his best album for sure for me. Like I said, I've always been never quite considerably a fan of his, but I've always been intrigued and I've always enjoyed what he's doing. And this is the album that's tipped me over the edge, thinking, okay, this guy, yeah, I'm very much on board, very much big on this one, and there'll be a lot of tracks I'll be coming back to throughout the year for sure. And yeah, for me, very impressed with this. A nice early highlight as well, and easy 7 out of 10 from me. Maybe he could even go higher, honestly. I feel like as the year goes by, when those summer months roll in, these tracks could hit a bit harder. So don't be surprised if I change and, you know, later down the year I say this album's grown on me, because I could feel it. But yeah, like I say, very much on board with this. I think it's easily his best work to date, and would love to see what you guys think as well. So let me know in the comments if you agree with me, disagree with me, what's your favourite track, what's your favourite album of his as well. Do have a good day. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out more reviews, check out more videos on the channel. Have a good day. Goodbye.